to these elections, we at the U.S. Consulate have felt it is a very important part of our job to talk about American democracy and Indian democracy as well. And so we've been holding a series of seminars, roundtables, and discussions on various topics. 2 weeks ago, we had a roundtable on youth and politics. Earlier this week, we had a roundtable discussion on the role of women in politics, both women as voters and women as politicians. And just like the principal said, I don't just hope, I expect in about 10 years, 5-10 years time, to meet many of you when you are members of parliament or working within ministries within your home state or potentially as diplomats. But you need to be involved. It is not impossible to get involved in politics. And I would encourage you to think about it, and think about it as something to do. Because India, just like the United States, needs good young women to raise their voice and to get involved, be it with political parties or on specific issues that are of interest to you. So I would encourage you not just to be actively involved in the discussion today, but actively involved outside of this discussion, bringing up issues that matter to you and raising your voice. At this time, it's my pleasure, because you did not come here to listen to me, to introduce just briefly our distinguished panelists today and to invite them to come up to the stage and begin this discussion. Today we are delighted to have very distinguished panelists talking about the role of social media and digital technology in elections. We're delighted to have Mr. Sanjay Pinto, lawyer, columnist, and a well-known TV personality. Mr. Karuba Shankar, social media entrepreneur and blogger, recently organized a very successful TEDx event here in Chennai. Ms. Asha Bay, our social media guru at the Consulate, and Ms. Sarah Talalay, a former journalist who currently is a vice consul at the Consulate, and Sarah will be the moderator for the discussion. Now, we're talking about social media today, and I would certainly encourage all of you to, after this discussion, come to our website and other websites to learn more information about U.S. elections, the election process, as well as a variety of information about the United States. You can come to our Consulate website, which is chennai.usconsulate.gov, or visit us on our Facebook page, chennai.usconsulate, or our Twitter account. You can also find out information about educational opportunities in the United States, because I think it is really a wonderful education, not just to get a great degree at a great university like MOP Vaishnav or Loyola College, but to have the opportunity to travel elsewhere and to experience a different culture. It really does open your horizons. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Sarah for this interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Dr. Prasad. Thank you, faculty and students, for having us here. I know David gave you a very brief introduction to our panelists. I'm going to give a slightly longer but not very long introduction. We're going to start first with a man who needs no introduction, Sanjay Pinto, the longtime face of NDTV in South India and former resident editor of NDTV 24/7. Sanjay Pinto interviewed just about every top public figure in India, from prime ministers and union ministers to chief ministers and governors. He joined the Consulate for a panel we conducted during President Obama's visit to India in 2010. Sanjay is now a lawyer with the Madras High Court and a columnist for The Hindu. Next, we have Karuba Shankar, CEO of Business Blogging, a social media consulting firm. But Karuba is far more than that. He's an entrepreneur, author, and social media expert extraordinaire. I think Karuba has done just about everything, starting a variety of businesses, a farm and book publishing house, as well as authoring 3 books, including Copyright and Left, Understanding Creative Commons. He's a professional podcaster and has interviewed all kinds of global achievers. And from the U.S. Consulate, my colleague, Asha Bay. Asha is our manager for social media and online strategy and serves as acting social media coordinator for all of U.S. Mission India. Asha is a former journalist who worked as a multimedia content producer for NBC and worked behind the scenes in broadcast journalism for CNN, CNBC, and National Public Radio. She did a stint as a print journalist covering Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign. Now, a little about me. I'm a former reporter as well, who spent 21 years in the newspaper business at papers around the United States. My most recent job was covering the business of sports in South Florida near Miami. I've also covered several local elections. It's really great to be back here at MOP Vaishnav. You may know that Asha and I were here in March for a Women and Media Roundtable the Consulate held in celebration of Women's History Month. This time, we're talking about the role of media in elections in both our great nations, the world's oldest and largest democracies. We will discuss the similarities, our democracies, our candidates' freedom of speech, campaign advertising, and the differences. Your candidates can own television channels. Some of ours have really mastered Twitter and Facebook. Yours are better at the power of the SMS. We are really just scratching the surface of using social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, to power campaigns and rally supporters. Television continues to be a powerful medium, as it has been since the inception of the televised U.S. presidential debate. In 1960, the first televised debate really made John F. Kennedy's candidacy when he appeared as a telegenic, tanned, laid-back figure next to a sweating, haggard, uncomposed Richard Nixon. We have examples from this year's debates, but let's begin our program. We'll start first with Asha.
Thank you, Sarah. So I have a little slideshow to go along with my speech. Social media in the United States and in many other countries is changing the way we choose our politicians, from the way it's used by politicians to launch and support their candidacies, to the way it helps keep politicians on their toes, and how it's transformed traditional media coverage. Having worked as a reporter covering the local news angle of President Bill Clinton's first election, to working behind the scenes in TV and online, and in TV at NBC, to my work in social media here at the Consulate, I've witnessed the evolution of social media and technology in the mainstream press. So let's start at the very beginning with a man named Howard Dean. Dean, a former governor of Vermont, did something revolutionary back in the 2004 presidential election cycle. According to the Pew Research Center's Project for Excellence in Journalism, he was the first presidential candidate to use blogging, the first to use his website to organize meetups, and the first candidate to use other internet technology as a major part of his campaign. By the 2008 election cycle, Hillary Clinton was one of 3 candidates who bypassed the mainstream media and announced her candidacy on her website. The others were New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson and a then relatively unknown Illinois senator named Barack Obama. 2008 was also the election when Obama and his internet-savvy campaign used his website, as Pew notes, to invigorate a national grassroots campaign and raise millions in small donations. His opponent, Republican presidential contender John McCain, preferred to joke about his inability to use email or the web. We all know who won. Flash forward to 2012. Social media is not an option. If you're serious about running for office in America, you better have a website, a Facebook page, and a Twitter page. And while you're at it, don't forget making yourself known on Google+, YouTube, and Tumblr. You can connect with Republican presidential contender Mitt Romney on all of those platforms, plus the music streaming service Spotify. President Barack Obama is also on Spotify, as you can see from both their tweets about it. President Obama is currently on all of the same social media sites that Romney is, and then some, including mobile app, SMS, and Instagram. So how is coverage of the candidates affected by all these platforms? Sorry about that. Turn on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, any of the major cable or TV networks, and you'll see reports on what's trending on Twitter or data walls, monitoring tweets like Twitter's the latest stock Twitter, like Twitter is the latest stock Twitter, Storyfy pages with the latest compilation of tweets, posts, photos, and video on key campaign topics like immigration or energy policy, reporters live blogging and tweeting from events, use of website and mobile platforms to chart polls and broadcast reports from, even iPad apps. You name it, broadcast media in America is using social media just as much as the candidates are. For better or worse, they're taking what's trending on social media and reporting about it. Okay, we're missing a picture there, but that should be Big Bird up there. And what happened is during the first presidential debate, when Governor Romney said he was going to cut government funding for the public broadcasting system, he added, "I like PBS, I like Big Bird." And pretty soon, the Twitterverse was full of tweets about Big Bird, including from reporters. In fact, the Twitter government account @gov noted that the phrase Big Bird generated about 17,000 tweets per minute. After the vice presidential debate between Paul Ryan and Vice President Joe Biden, malarkey became the catchphrase heard around the Twitterverse. And just like with Big Bird, news stations across America came up with news stories about sassy Joe Biden and his use of an old-fashioned term. The media is not only monitoring or repeating what's on social media to report on the election, it's also teaming up with social media. USA Today, for example, uses the Twitter Political Index to drive its own USA Today Twitter election meter. The Twitter Political Index, or Twindex as it's also known, analyzes about 2 million tweets weekly, tracks how much each candidate is being tweeted about, and compares the candidates' scores. CNN also has a Facebook election insights page, tracking how many people are talking about or liking each candidate on Facebook. On this page, you can track the data by state, gender, age, or time. In addition, reporters are actively asking social media citizens to tweet to them about campaign issues, taking polls on Twitter and Facebook, and chatting with social netizens about their preferences. Where is all this social media taking the U.S. election process? How will it affect the presidential election? Come November 6th, we're going to find out. Thank you.
And next, for the Indian perspective, we'll start with Sanjay Pinto.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Whenever I come to MOP Vaishnav College, I don't feel like a guest, because Dr. Nirmala Prasad, whom I've known for the time I was a student in college, once gave me an honorary alumnus status, although this is a women's college. I also happened to marry a girl from your college who was also a lecturer here, who's sitting here, Vidya. So in more ways than one, the umbilical cord is still somewhere intact. Great weather outside, past 2 o'clock, time to get back home, and at least an hour's session left to go through. What does it make you feel like? Exactly how we make our TV viewers feel. A captive audience, ladies and gentlemen. But I can tell you that all 4 of us are going to endeavor to ensure that your time is well spent here. How many of you have heard of Lord Byron? Quite a few literature students here. You know, Lord Byron's tryst with literature began when he was in class 4 with an essay writing competition. He was asked to write an essay on the wedding feast at Cana. For those who are not familiar with this biblical passage, it's about a miracle that Jesus Christ worked when he converted the water into wine at a wedding feast. So the topic was the wedding feast at Cana. Lord Byron won the first prize. And all he wrote, ladies and gentlemen, all he wrote was one sentence. Jesus looked at the water and the water blushed. One sentence. And that's what television is all about today. It's about brevity, it's about making that impact, it's about one sentence, it's about one punchline, it's about one image. It's about that one visual element. A television story today is about a minute long. You may shoot till thy kingdom come, but 1 minute is what you have, and to tell your story and to tell it like it is. Now, I think the fundamental difference between the United States and India when it comes to election coverage, the fundamental difference after we witnessed 2 great presidential debates in your country, is that here, the political leaders do not engage with each other. Can you ever imagine a Congress president, prime ministerial candidate and a BJP prime ministerial candidate coming together on one platform? Can you ever imagine a DMK and AIADMK chief ministerial candidate coming together on one platform? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the fundamental difference. That there they are willing to engage. There you have political rivalry. Here you have political animosity. I'm not here to tell you sweet things that will please all of you. When you call a journalist and now who's a lawyer, you expect the worst. All right? Now, this is the fundamental difference. Here we don't even know who our main contenders are, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know. In this era of coalition politics in India, we don't know who is going to be thrown up. Some rabbit out of the hat will emerge someday. And here you have spokespersons who come into TV studios and it's a slanging match. I was in awe of both President Obama and Governor Romney. They waited for the other to finish the sentence. You don't have that on national television today. You don't have that, ladies and gentlemen. It's one trying to outshout the other. All right, I'm not here to say, as I said earlier, to say things that will only please David and his team. All right, now, in India, there has been a proliferation of TV channels. We had about 2 channels in the 90s, and today we have more than 500 channels in India. If you're in Tamil Nadu, the state to which we all belong, every political party owns a TV channel. The medium is the message, ladies and gentlemen, and the person who pays the piper calls the tune. Today, ladies and gentlemen, political parties are self-sufficient when it comes to publicity. Make no mistake. Let's not be under any false pretenses here. Let's make no false pretenses. Political parties do not need the media as much as the media needs the political parties, period. Now, I was born and brought up virtually in NDTV, the channel founded by Dr. Pranoy Roy. What Florence Nightingale was to nursing, many say Pranoy Roy is to cephalology. And there was a time when we got it right. There was a time when you could do an opinion poll and predict the winner. It's like based on the principle, if you drink a cup of coffee, you will know whether it has sugar or not. But today, it's not possible. It's not that easy because maybe those sugar crystals are somewhere at the bottom and the cup has not been stirred well enough. Today, you have exit polls which have been banned because enter election commission, enter a model code of conduct in India. So you don't have exit polls for a very logical reason, because you have elections which are conducted in phases, phase 1, phase 2. So especially for a general election, a parliamentary election, if you come out with results of exit polls, you may actually influence voters in another state. So for that reason, the model code of conduct doesn't allow exit polls. But times have changed. Now, if you're under the impression that elections are won on the basis of TV coverage, you're sadly mistaken. They're not. They're not, ladies and gentlemen. If it were the case, your Sharat Babu, this boy from the slums of Chennai who went on to study in IIM Ahmedabad and contested elections, if elections were based on TV coverage, Sharat Babu would have won hands down. He wouldn't have come a cropper thrice. Your Lok Paritran party, composed of IIT students, would have won elections. They wouldn't have lost their deposits. Elections are not won on the strength of TV coverage. Elections are won on the strength of 3 M's: manifestos, money power, muscle power. Make no mistake. How much biryani and booze you give the voter, that is what matters. Under the banana leaf, by the way, David, and you have this tradition in India, especially in the south, where you serve food on a banana leaf. You get a lot of chlorophyll when you eat also food from that. Under the banana leaf, you don't have tissue papers. You have currency notes. So that's what's happening here, because elections today in India are based on the Rig Veda, how you rig elections. And this is a glorious opportunity. This is a glorious opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, for the fourth estate, for the media to play a very proactive role, for television channels to go hammer and tongs. Are we doing that? After 15 years, I can put my hand across my heart and tell you, no, we have not done enough. I'm part of this collective responsibility that we need to take. I'm part of it. I'm not here, somebody who stops playing cricket and then goes and talks about players. I don't want to be a cricket commentator in that sense. I'm telling you, we are all part of this failure. And why? I believe that in India, the real heroes when it comes to elections are not TV channels, not people like us who are called to speak at functions. Election Commission of India. We remember T.N. Seshan because of his role during the elections. And how fair was that? I remember, ladies and gentlemen, that once when it came to election symbols, T.N. Seshan as Chief Election Commissioner refused to allot an umbrella as an election symbol. You know why? Because what if it rains on that particular day, on the day of polling, and people have umbrellas there? You're actually inadvertently influencing voters, which is not allowed because there's a ban 48 hours before polling begins. That was how fair the system was. Today, it's not possible. Are we hard enough on our politicians? Do we ask the tough questions? With all the honesty at my command, with all the emphasis at my command, I can tell you, no, we don't ask them the tough questions. Why don't we ask them the tough questions? Because we journalists are rated and assessed on the basis of exclusive interviews we get. It's not possible for you to do a critical review of a Rajnikant film or a Shah Rukh Khan film today and get an exclusive interview with that person. They will blacklist you. Similarly, it's not possible to call a spade a spade. To some extent, yes, you have freedom of speech and expression. It's not possible to take a hard line because the political party will boycott you. You will not be allowed anywhere near there. Forget threats of violence. You will not be allowed anywhere near there. What use is it then to be a journalist? So a lot of people, a lot of very idealistic youngsters stay away from really asking those tough questions. There's so much to be done. How many of you saw the water outside your college, right? You saw the water, right? Had a problem entering the college? You'll have a problem going out as well? Do you know who your MLA is? Do you know who your MP is? That's a failure not of yours, it's our failure in the media. We haven't told you enough. We see the behavior of our parliamentarians on Lok Sabha TV. We see them. We see how many of them walk out, how many of them, the way they behave, the language that's used. The role of the television channels today is to hold them accountable at election time. Today there are several constituencies in India where people are going around holding placards. Have you seen him missing in action? Have you seen this person? The local MLA or MP is not to be found. After elections, he disappears. You need to use technology, television, to actually show back those images, play back those images. You need to show people, look, how many questions has this MP of yours asked in Parliament? How many times has he walked out? How has he behaved? How many mics has he thrown? How many whatever else he has thrown inside? You need to ask them. Do you know how, you don't know who your MP or MLA is, so obviously there's no point in asking you the next question. Do you know how the MP's constituency fund is spent? How much money is siphoned off? Do you know how many of your elected representatives have criminal cases against them? We don't know. If we don't know who they are, how do we know what their antecedents are? Do you know what their assets are? Every time, in fact, Vidya, my wife, pointed out that during the Chola period, you had Chola kings. In fact, inscriptions were found where they actually had assets declared, even then. So it's not new now. We had it during the Chola period. Today, you have assets declared. It's a joke. It's a farce. Well, some people, yes, are true when they come out with their assets. They are honest. I know some of the top-notch politicians in India who say that they own an ambassador car, an old Maruti 800 car. That's all they have, a few lakh rupees in the bank. Few jewels like bangles or whatever of their wives. That's all they have. You like to believe that? Right? Now, we spoke about freebies. Today, if one party promises free color TVs, the other will promise mixies and grinders. Right? Today, what we get, are we asking them, where is the money going to come from? You're giving freebies. Where is the money going to come from? In every state, I'm not talking only of Tamil Nadu. Everywhere it's happening. Across the country. Where is the money going to come from? If there's a 1 lakh crore debt in a state, how will they then give freebies? Where is the money going to come from? Do we ask those questions? We don't. we have failed in our role as journalists, as TV journalists. I'm not going to go into Kiruba's area of social media, but I must tell you that that is one reason why the social media has emerged today. It's a reaction to the disenchantment with the mainstream media. So what we are actually giving people is not perspective, not analysis, but propaganda. Because as I said, every TV channel, every political party owns a TV channel. Voter turnout. I'm sorry to say, how many of you have voted in the election? Few of you. That's about roughly, okay, your hand is gone up or come? Okay, but 6.5 people have voted. All right. Do the math. I've never been good in math. Do the math. Put your hands across your hearts and tell me. All right? If you go to the US Consulate, you'll find a board inside. Ratna, pardon me, I'm saying this. My good friend Ratna Mukherjee is the reason why I'm here. There's a board which says, issue of a visa is a privilege and not a right. Right? Voting is your right. Okay? But how many of you will stand, I mean, all of you, I'm sure, most of you, will go and stand for 3 hours outside the American consulate for a visa, even if you're not required to stand. But how many of you will spend 30 minutes standing in a polling booth? Answer me. How many of you will stand? Again, what is the role of television today? Are we inspiring and motivating people to go out and vote, except for one odd Jago Re campaign that is screened reluctantly? I know how many times, how many mails I've seen to that effect. You have to carry the Jago Re campaign, drop this commercial. So we have failed the people. Now, the media, if it wants to be, it can, it's called the watchdog of democracy. I'm going to end now because time is running out. I don't want to be like a parliamentarian. I never will become one. The watchdog of democracy, they say. The media is the watchdog of democracy. Sometimes that watchdog has to not just bark but also bite. I'm of the opinion that today the television medium hardly barks, is always sleeping when it comes to the rich and famous and the powerful. But some poor, hapless person, even let's say, for instance, that witch hunt we carried, Arushi murder case. We don't know what happened, but yet media does its own trial, sentencing and execution also. Right? The media is the watchdog becomes a bloodhound when it comes to ordinary, hapless people, but becomes a dog that's suddenly the tail tucked behind its legs when it comes to the powerful. We don't take them on. It's like, I don't know how many of you have seen that detergent ad. Tough on dirt, soft on clothes. Right? We are tough on the common man, on the poor man who has no defense, but we are soft on the powers that be. This is a fact. This is the uncomfortable truth, the inconvenient truth. Finally, I'd like to leave you, ladies and gentlemen, with, I love Mark Twain. And Mark Twain once said, I never let my schooling interfere with my education. Do you know what? I just hope and pray that we will not reach a stage when we'll have to say, I never let my television, I never let my media interfere with my information. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sanjay. Now we'll go to last, but definitely not least, Karuba.
Thank you. So, are you going to go there? It extends long enough. Right, this is how far I go. Show of hands. How many of us are on Facebook? Raise your hands. Right? Obvious. So this is time and again I've found the similar thing across all colleges. I teach at IIT Madras, at IIM Bangalore, and I go, and this is similar case right from the top colleges down to smaller ones as well. 99% of students are on Facebook, and a lot of them are on Twitter. Thank you. And so I take exactly this statistic, and I run a social media consulting firm. I know that your principal said that you will all start, you will become a social media consultant. Please don't. I would rather have less competition. So I took this, and I took this upon as a commercial activity to go and approach politicians, both in Congress and BJP, and even our local DMK and ADMK. Because this is a business opportunity, right? I would go out there, and I've been doing this for the last 2-3 months. And you know what they tell? They said, I completely agree. Facebook, super powerful. Twitter, not as effective, but I'm sure it's a great platform. But இப்ப வேணாங்க, election இன்னும் நிறைய நாள் இருக்கு. ஒரு எலெக்ஷனுக்கு ஒரு 1 month or 2 months before, we will start getting active. That is the sort of response. And it's amazing that how, while the political class understands the need of it, they don't understand how it functions. You know, last night I took my family out to English Winglish. How many of you have seen it? I don't speak Hindi. My wife doesn't. Obviously, my 2 kids don't. The chances of us going to a Hindi movie and with a very aging Sridevi is very, very little, right? But guess what? This Tamilian family goes across, buys tickets and goes watches this movie. And we loved it. We come back feeling really, really good. We had a choice of watching Matran or we had a choice of watching English Winglish. And we went and watched English Winglish. You know why? Because all of my friends on my Facebook timeline who have gone out there have given a big thumbs up. Some of them 2 thumbs up. So I tend to believe what my friends recommend more than what a Times of India or a Hindu does. So I think that is the power. And if social media, Sanjay Pinto rightly said that we are all disenchanted with the traditional form of, especially with TV medium, because every TV channel has its own agenda and own axe to grind, right? And even the so-called neutral channels also, you don't know what agenda does each journalist has as well. And that's why I think the power of social media truly will come into being. So I come across at exactly at about 1:55 to MOP Vaishnav College. Right? I'm sorry, 12:55 because we are supposed to be here at 1. And I come inside and suddenly I start driving my car at 2 kilometers per hour in the road that is leading. Do you know why? I do not want to swim across your college, the road to come to your things. I was hoping that some girl out there will start laying bricks so that I can come, but nobody did. And then someone was kind enough to say that he's a speaker, so they let me drive across the road. You come across to my house in Virugambakam, the street across, the road was laid brand new 9 days ago. Brand new. And they had these night eye vision painted, reflective paint, painted across in the center and in the sides and looked fabulous for exactly 7 days. Yesterday's rain and half the road is washed out, and I'm not kidding. And I'm not kidding. So I think even as individuals, I'm not sure if we truly understand the power of the medium. What stops you guys from taking the picture of your road? What stops me from taking the picture of my road and putting it up? Do we? We don't. Why? Because Facebook or social media is more a personal platform rather than a platform to take up social issues. Or that's the way that we think it is. I think Sanjay was bang on that the change will only happen when I think a lot of us will start taking these issues up and start being very proactive. Just to give you another statistic, how many of us don't use Wikipedia, don't visit, raise your hand? All of us do, right? Absolutely. All of us, we use Wikipedia. But let me give you a statistic. How many countries are there in the world? Give me a quick number. 196. Actually, I think it's 197. India ranks world number 5 when it comes to that's the 5th from the top out of 197 countries in terms of the sheer number of people using Wikipedia. Isn't that awesome? Go ahead, clap, really. Let me give you another statistic. They made another consensus based on the number of people contributing to Wikipedia, which is writing, editing, and India ranks about 182 out of 197 countries. So I think we are all leechers, meaning that we tend to take things and use it rather than us contributing back into it. And I think Wikipedia is truly a fantastic benchmark. We are not original content creators. We always look upon people like Sanjay, Pinto, journalists and TV people out to create news for us, and we don't. I think, so it has to really come from us, that we should start really writing a lot of things, start being very opinionated, start expressing our opinions. I think that's when social media will really be very, very effective. And finally, an interesting statistic. And this is my last, so breathe easy. 2008, 2012. A quick comparison. Facebook has grown 4.5 times in terms of the user base. No, sorry, make that 7.5 times in terms of user base. Twitter has grown about, I think about 5 times. YouTube has a little about more than doubled because it really had a huge number even previously. In spite of all this, if you take the two American big parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, they are spending surprisingly a very less portion of their advertising and publicity budget on the digital space. If every one of you have risen your hands, just imagine what the US youngsters would have done. In spite of all that, I think the advertising spend is very less, and they're absolutely bang on right. Social media is not yet an effective medium to make a big mark, because if we did, Anna Hazare would have won hands down, right? Thankfully, the Anna Centenary Library still continues to be a library. Right? So I think that's my take. Right? We all tend to hype up, we all tend to dance around and glorify social media, but it's a great platform medium, but not yet one that makes a big dent in the political scene. Thank you so much for being a great audience.
Thank you, Karuba. I think that you can see there are big differences in how we use the media in both of our countries. And I'm really, given what Sanjay Pinto said about political parties in India not needing the media as much as the media needs the political parties, I'm kind of wondering how important television is to candidates in each of our countries. In the US, we expect this year's presidential election will be decided by just a handful of undecided voters. So how important is television to convincing those undecideds when most people watching have already made up their minds? Before I hand it over to Asha to start, I'm just going to give an example. President Obama was considered to have lost the first presidential debate of the 2012 election 2 weeks ago when he appeared stiff and unengaging, looking at his notes frequently rather than engaging the audience as his opponent Mitt Romney did. It makes a difference. A former editor of mine wrote, and this is where we're going to bring in social media as well, maybe the two need to be in concert, and we'll hear from the panelists. A former editor of mine wrote this on her Facebook page during the first presidential debate. Mitt is looking at me. Barack is looking down at notes or at Jim Lehrer. Wow, those stupid little things do matter. But we'll hear more from our panelists. So, Asha, would you like to start?
Well, from just observing the debates and reading some articles about how voters are going to pick the next president of the United States, it seems like it may just come down to likability. Who comes across as more likable, who they feel they can trust, versus what they're seeing on social media or what they're seeing on TV. Because voters know that on TV, everybody's playing a role, or they're paying for their ad. And on social media, there's a lot of different voices that are, everybody's tweeting about this or that, but sometimes they're just tweeting about, silly things like the word malarkey or Big Bird, and which doesn't really matter in the scheme of things if you're thinking about issues like healthcare or energy or other issues that might affect you in your daily life. And that would be the reason that you would pick someone to be president. But yeah, I think it's going to come down to likability.
Asha, I think it's a lot to do with can you be politically correct? Should you be politically incorrect or politically accurate? There's the difference between the two. We know that there's a minister in India, Shashi Tharoor, who lost his post because he tweeted about cattle class. All right? Robert Vadra uses the expression mango people, banana republic. Now, I think in India, people are sensitive, and rightly so. I'm not saying they are hypersensitive as in they are prickly pears, but they are sensitive. They don't take it lying down when somebody calls us a banana republic. If we were a banana republic, we wouldn't be giving a terrorist like Kasab a free trial. Now, I think when it comes to the social media, only few people engage. The problem with the social media, and I'd like to get Kiruba's views on this, is that today, Twitter can effectively make the press conference redundant. If you're at a press conference, assuming I'm addressing a press conference and David, who's sitting there as a journalist, asks me a question, I can answer him. If he's not satisfied, Dr. Nirmala Prasad can ask me a counter question, Dr. Lalita can ask me a third question, somebody else, Ratna, may ask me another question. I cannot get away with what I'm saying if it's a press conference. On Twitter, which is what corporates do with their quarterly results, which is what political leaders do now, you tweet and forget about it. So it's like a sniper attack sometimes, without being accountable. You don't have to answer difficult questions because you're not face to face with someone. Is this a problem in India?
It is a problem, but the ones who are smart will realize the engaging medium of it. For example, how many of you watched the space jump that Felix Baumgartner? How many of you watched it? It happened late at night. If you don't, at least watch the video of it out there. Red Bull is the one that kind of funded in the entire thing. And it's just amazing how they pulled it off truly. It's not so much the jump itself, but it's the kind of the build-up towards the event. But what really impressed me more than the actual live coverage of the jump was the conversations that happened in the back channel on Twitter. Amazing perspectives of people actually coming in. So I think that is what I think a lot of us politicians, the corporates, even us, just the students, I think we kind of, we're missing that out on. It's an advantageous position to actually engage, and Sanjay said it very right. We use it as an announcement platform. You go out there and tell the world what you want to say, and then quickly turn away and do the things that matter to you. The people who succeed in social media are the ones who engage, keep their ears very close to the ground, and participate. I think those are the ones who win.
Sure. See, I'm not a mainstream journalist anymore because they say journalists are prophets of doom. But I still am a little cynical, and I think every journalist, or at least a former journalist, even lawyers, should be a little cynical, because only then we will question people, we will play an adversarial role. So don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering, how many of our politicians, because we are in the context of elections, have email IDs? You need an email ID to use social media, right? How many of them have email IDs? How many of them access their emails every day? That is a problem today. We are not techno-savvy enough, at least in positions in public, people in public office are not techno-savvy enough. Today, President Obama will have a youngster writing those wonderful speeches. And I'm a great fan of President Obama. I've said this openly. I know some of those speeches by heart. You wake me up in the middle of the night, my wife is witness to that. I will rattle off his speeches by heart. I actually think Michelle Obama is a better speaker than President Obama, but that's a different matter. I really believe that Indians, the politicians, are very good speakers, but we don't use technology well enough. They have in the US, they have an entire team, a social media team backing up, people helping out on, sending out tweets and all that. Here, there are parties which don't even have a spokesperson. It's so difficult. There is this silence is not eloquent anymore, When you look for a political reaction to something, You don't get it. It's very difficult, especially if you can work. I always say this, if you can work in Tamil Nadu, you can work anywhere else in the world.
I was actually going to sort of follow on that idea of, you mentioned that how many politicians have email IDs here. How important is it in our respective countries for candidates to master social media? And are the candidates here using it?
I'll give you a small analogy. About a week ago, the heads, the powers that be of an organization called NTPC, National Thermal Power Corporation, we actually have to thank them a lot because they are the ones who are giving the bulk of the power right now, at least the power that we have. So this is like the CEOs, the general managers, truly the top. And so we're doing this kind of a workshop, a social media workshop for them. And then the CEO walks in a little late. And then much to the embarrassment, and I was doing this live thing, we go to, let's see what NTPC is doing. NTPC Twitter account has been blocked by some Chinese porn guy. Facebook, they're not even present on Facebook. And their budgets are really, really large, truly. Now, the problem that I found really is that the person at the very top, if he believes in the power of social media, that person, he or she, need not be a very, very active user of social media. But if he believes in the power and if he gives us blessings and encourages the team below him to start using it, I think it's it turns out to be a lot more successful. Obviously, I'm guessing that it's not Barack Obama who goes and updates Twitter on his own or updates Facebook. He possibly cannot, but I'm sure there's a very crack team of people who are in charge of it. I think so. That is what is really required. Even in the political parties that we have out there, we have, like for example, there's Anant Kumar, Bangalore BJP. He was very proactive. Shashi Tharoor. I mean, you can just count the number of people who are very active, but they're doing it for their own personal brand building purposes. But from a party perspective, very rarely do we see that kind of thing happening. So the short answer is no.
There are some really, especially the younger politicians. For instance, Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah is very proactive on Twitter. I've seen actually people tweeting. And while I am very critical of the political establishment, I must also say give credit where it's due. I've seen tweets, and I in fact, I tweeted Omar. Somebody coming from the airport and the auto guy fleecing him. He's able to tweet, he's able to reach the Chief Minister directly, and he in turn says, I'm sorry about this, I'll look into it. All right, this is the power of the social media. Okay? Dr. Manmohan Singh is on Twitter. It's at PMO. In fact, a former colleague of mine, Pankaj Pachori, who was with me in NDTV, is now communications advisor to the Prime Minister. So the times are slowly changing, that the Prime Minister today has a communications advisor. This wasn't there earlier. Maybe a decade earlier, we didn't have a communications advisor. There was H.K. Dua many years ago, but it stopped after that. So I think today there are young politicians who are using the social media well, but I think there's a lot more scope to be able to reach out to people, because it's all about connecting. And I think the media, whether it's social media, whether it is the mainstream media, especially when it comes to television viewers, a television news bulletin is a product. Viewers are consumers. It is the job and the duty and responsibility of television to actually hold people accountable and to help them make that informed choice. When you go in to vote, you need to remember things that you saw on TV. That, okay, this politician is seeking my vote again. How did he fare in the last 5 years? How many times did he speak in Parliament? How many cases does he have against him? What are his assets? Did he clear the water outside my college? These are things you need to know. If you don't know who your MLA is, we are to blame, I must say.
I do want to talk about accountability in a moment, but Asha, do you want to address that it sounds like it's crucial to be on social media, for candidates to be on social media in the United States?
Yes. As I mentioned during my presentation, I do believe it is. And it also helps politicians. There's a mayor in New Jersey, for example. Somebody tweeted to him that they lost some quarters in the meter on one of the streets, and he said, well, I'm at my office right now, come on by and I'll reimburse you. And that is like the power of social media, is that you can respond right away to people. And obviously, I mean, once you get to be president, you can't just tweet things like that. But I also agree with Kuruba, what Kuruba was saying about that it comes from the top down. And the fact is the Obama team does use a lot of different social media, and I think that has spread to other people because of that. And I mean, they're not the only leader, but it does, for each company, if your CEO is into it and that spreads to the rest of the people, more people will get into it. But if not, then, it's one of those things that you either believe in Facebook or you don't. And sometimes I'm skeptical myself, but then other times you see when people are actually, having a conversation back and forth, that things do get done, and to me, it's a nice feeling.
In terms of accountability, I'm wondering how the panelists feel about whether social media keeps the candidates honest. For example, Republican vice presidential nominee Paul Ryan was called out for fibbing that he ran a marathon in fewer than 3 hours, and Runner's World, of all publications, actually figured out that could not have been possible, and that story had great legs, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, because it was a different kind of media that actually had checked the facts on this. So do the panelists, let's start with you, Kuruba, is that what social media can do?
Oh, absolutely. Forget social media for a minute. Think about each one of us out here. When you go apply for a job, you can be absolutely rest assured that the HR manager and the HR team will go through your Facebook page, will go through your blog if you have one, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and they will make an opinion about you. Gone are the days when every time they ask for a CV, we give a 2-sheet paper, right, an A4 sheet, and that's usually what is our resume. Everyone knows that we lie, right? Just like how Kalyana Pannambodhu, we all go well dressed up, right? But that's not we are every day, right? But so that's the way every HR knows. So similarly out here, even during elections, it's a great way for us to find out what is the track record of a particular candidate. I'm not sure how effective it is for a party itself, but for an individual, like when Sanjay Pinto asked you, do you know who your current MLA is from that area you're coming, who your MP is? Honestly, I don't know, and I'm suspecting none of you know as well. But when we start knowing, like only the principal seems to know, so at least it's coming from the very top. That's good. So maybe when times change and we start giving a little bit more respect and we start getting a little bit more serious, then we can start evaluating who to vote based on what those two candidates that we are going to vote for, that MLA or an MP candidate, and then we can make a slightly more educated guess, right? So I think that's where it comes down to. Thank you.
Interesting there, but the same HR managers who look at your Facebook and Facebook pages, once you join there, will tell you no Facebook in the office, not realizing you could use it on your phone. But I'll give you an example. In fact, my mother-in-law was looking for a suitable boy for her younger daughter. They're very clear that they want a teetotaler. So this boy in his matrimonial website, a prospective groom, had mentioned that he's a teetotaler. I think he's never sort of touched a bottle in his life. And then she went into his Facebook account. See, you don't have privacy settings. You can go and you can read posts on your wall. For instance, you can't write on my wall because there were people writing rubbish sometimes. So I disabled that. And this boy writes as a wall post, my God, 8 days of being a teetotaler, man. Life sucks. All right? Marriage alliance called off. If you can do it for a prospective groom, imagine what you can do for a prospective MLA and MP. Right? Imagine what you can do. Today, do you know what is the expenditure, the expenditure for contesting elections, how much money you can spend? There's a ceiling of 17.5 lakh rupees. most candidates are cutting across the political divide when they were interviewed. They were given tickets on the basis of caste, on the basis of the amount of money you can spend. Okay? Most of them said they would be able to spend up to 3 crore rupees. That's 18.5 times more than the expenditure ceiling. Where does the money come from? We don't question. Social media, you can actually hold people accountable. I think it's a great tool, but I must say that Twitter, maybe you can tell us about how it is in your country, but here Twitter has become an industry of hate. I mean, the kind of things that are said about religion, the communal comments. To give you an example, there's so much of hatred against the political class, yes, to some extent even justifiable. But the kind of things that are said on Twitter, there's a tweet, I'll give you an example without naming the person. I will worship the ground on which the corpse of so-and-so is found. The kind of comments that a caste and community, all these things come in there. So you have this anonymity on the social media. Like I can create a Twitter account, Kiruba Shankar 2, right? And I can tweet all kinds of rubbish. Today I think there are more fake profiles of the political class than real profiles. Kiruba, anonymity on the net, especially on Twitter. Yeah, and Twitter doesn't have an office in India. If you have to sue someone, you have to get a subpoena from a court in California. So if you say something about me, defamatory, I can't sue you until I get your IP address, which Twitter has to disclose only with a subpoena from a court in California. I don't know how many are aware of that.
Yeah, actually the biggest problem for social media actually comes from spam. I was just, in preparation for this talk, I was just going through and it's found that for Mitt Romney, who's the competitor for Barack Obama, there are about 200 blog posts on an average written which is against Mitt Romney that are published out there. So you can and for example, the space jump that happened, and there was a lot of people, can you believe, about 8 million people watching it on YouTube, hundreds of millions of people on TV. So the hashtag space jump was super powerful that day because a lot of people were checking, and a lot of marketing companies started using space jump, buy our new shoes, super powerful space jump. And so, it's the spam that will be a problem that is coming in.
Asha, before we go we're going to go to questions shortly from the audience, but Asha, will you talk about social media?
I believe social media can help keep candidates honest. Whether it always does is another question. But a lot of times, if a candidate says something, nowadays in the media, we have a lot of fact-checking going on. So it's in the newspapers and it's and broadcast TV, and then once it's in the newspapers and on TV, and the reporters are also tweeting about it or putting it on social media or the web, then it spreads, and then people are held accountable. So. That,
for instance, the Hindu newspaper has the reader's editor. You have a redressal mechanism. Television channels is something called the National Broadcasters Association, which actually is a good tool for self-regulation. You don't have self-regulation on the social media. You at least have it. There's some system of accountability in the mainstream media. And to give you an example why I've wrapped the media, I must also give you a shining example of self-regulation. When before the Babri Masjid verdict came out, the National Broadcasters Association, I got a copy of that, sent out strict do's and don'ts to all television channels not to show old visuals, old pictures of the mosque being demolished, because that will fan communal flames. Not a single channel showed visuals of the mosque being demolished. Not a single channel. That's a shining example of self-regulation that's possible in the mainstream media.
That's fascinating, actually. Let's open it up for questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question? Back there?
Good afternoon to all. I'm Sampriti here. My question is, will Mitt Romney's suggestion for the tax cut help stabilize the U.S. economy?
What?
I didn't understand. Did you hear the question?
For tax cuts, whether it will help the economy, right?
Yes.
Does anyone want to take that?
I actually believe that income tax in India should be abolished. All right, so any tax cuts are more than welcome. But whether it will stimulate the US economy is a bone of contention. In fact, that was also a bone of contention between the two of them in that first debate about tax cuts and all that. It's a moot point, really. One can have a separate session on that. But if you ask me, I think, yes, tax cuts definitely will pass muster with a common voter.
Anyone else want to? Do we have another question? Right there.
Good afternoon. My name is Papri Dash. I am from Asian College of Journalism. My question is for Sanjay sir. It's actually one question but divided in two parts. Can we learn some lessons from Indian media can learn, especially broadcast media, from US media's handling of the national elections, the debates and everything? And is there a possibility that Indian media can incorporate such techniques and use that in 2014's elections?
Thank you, and don't call me sir, just call me Sanjay. I think I'd like to flip that question on its head and say, rather than the media learning from the US media, Indian media learning from them, let the Indian politicians learn from them. How to conduct themselves in public, how to engage in a meaningful, mature debate without really spewing venom at one another, focus on real issues, poverty, healthcare. When was the last time you heard that here? I don't remember. I don't suffer from selective amnesia, but I don't remember. The real issues. Let's not get into personal slanging matches with one another, which is what is the staple of news today, unfortunately. That's one thing. Second thing about about 2014, I don't know whether it will be in 2014 or earlier. So as journalism students, be ready even next year. But I think, yes, in terms of coverage of real issues, some of the issues, I think the Western media has done a great job there. We are not lagging behind too much. But to give you a small example, sometimes it gets a little superficial here. I'll give you a very small example. It's a traditional custom here, David, that when a political leader goes on a campaign, all right? Now, I've covered 4 parliamentary elections and 4 assembly elections. Okay, that's how old I am, actually. And they actually hold aloft their babies, and the political leaders actually name their babies. There's a naming ceremony. And when the babies are named, it is a traditional culture to actually give them some money, to put a 500 rupee note or whatever in their hands. So when you name a baby, you're also giving that baby a gift. You're giving the baby a gift. Now, I know that there are several channels which went and showed that and circled that, okay, this person is bribing voters. You know, it's a multi-crore scandal. I mean, how you actually, in fact, there's no state funding of elections in India. So therefore, industrialists will contribute. The other day, we had the biggest contributors. You know, this industry contributed to the Congress, to the BJP. The entire breakup was there the other day, right? But these issues, these petty issues get highlighted, and the real issues are swept under the carpet. So I think we need to learn some lessons from them. And in terms of speaking, now I think some of them use teleprompters, right? And many of the people use teleprompters. Our politicians are ace public speakers. They need no teleprompters, no papers. Let's give credit where it's due. Some of the best speakers in the world are from India, and I'm proud to say that.
Would you like to say should politicians here learn from social media from the U.S.?
So I think, number one, I think just take a look at the best politicians, Indian politicians who are active on social media. And take some of the best politicians in the US active on social media. And you will notice that while both of them will get active towards the election time, as they should, but somehow I felt like the US politicians tend to keep their profiles active and engaged throughout the time, as against just only peaking towards the election time. And if there was one lesson, I think, so that's what I would say.
More questions from the audience?
Yeah, I'm Ashwita from MOP. After the first presidential debate, I think Barack Obama was in the lead before. He lost 2 points in the citizens poll. This was after the televising of the first presidential debate. So this difference in the points before and after, what does this say about the effect of the television in the presidential race?
You want to take that?
Well, I think what it says is that television is still a very powerful medium. and that people are affected when they see the candidates on TV, because most of them are not going to meet the candidates in person, and so when they see them debating, that's their chance to see what the person is like and to judge whether this person is someone that they'd want to have as their president. And which is why, Sarah referenced the 1960 elections and Nixon and Kennedy, and how the way that Kennedy came across helped him win the election, whereas the way Nixon came across didn't.
Just to add to that question about, they say that, the social media is a virtual world, it's not the real world, and it's not face-to-face. Yes, there's merit in that. But even during the first presidential debate, there were so many, there was voting that happened on Twitter, there were comments on Twitter, there was feedback on Twitter, real feedback, constructive criticism, people joining issue with the other, group. But in India, somehow, since that's not happening to that extent, you have, an important quality of a good political leader at election time is crowd management. How to get the crowd from various districts, how much money, 1,000 rupees usually per head. All right, so each person is paid about 500 to 1,000 rupees to come and sit there and clap hands. All right, so, this is something that we used to do when I was in law college. We used to actually get some of our classmates, we'll give them chits of paper. At this point, you start clapping. I never did this today, by the way. But I'm just saying, so crowd management is an important thing. When it comes to the social media, we need to understand, we the people need to engage with our political class through whatever means possible. Letters to the editors, social media. Maybe the next time we have this, we should have this in a bigger auditorium, or maybe in a Nehru Stadium or something. We have even the general public who will come there and engage, because unless you have the rules of discourse and the rules of engagement, we are not going to really effectively get the best out of the people we elect.
Sarah, I just wanted to add one more thing. Also, with social media, I think the reason why TV is still more powerful is because it's a direct message, and everybody can tune in and see that one picture, that one video that's happening. But on social media, you don't have to tune into that channel. You pick on Twitter, you pick the people that you're following. So you may just follow people that you agree with. You may follow the liberal media if you're a liberal, or you may follow the conservative media if you're a conservative. So you don't necessarily always see the other side. But with TV, you see everything.
Karuba is going to make a quick point, and then unfortunately we only have time for one more question, but I'm going to let Karuba talk first.
I take the hint very quickly. I read a statistic saying that the youngsters are actually spending more time on the internet than they are watching TV. So I'm going to throw this question out to you guys, right? Raise your hands if you believe. Just think of the last 1 week. Add up all the time that you spent on Facebook, Twitter, on your mobile phone, on your PC, laptop in your home, and then calculate the amount of time you saw TV. How many of you believe that you spent more time on internet than on TV? Raise your hands. Wow. Okay, thank you.
We're going to need to wrap this up, so we have time for one more, I think.
Hi, this is Manoj from the Asian College of Journalism. I have a question which I'd like to throw open to the entire panel. This is regarding the role of Twitter in both covering elections as well as the results. Because Twitter has become a kind of this instant spin room now, where even before the debate has ended, you have reactions, analysis, you name it. But the funny thing about Twitter is people tend to comment, follow people whose political ideologies they can identify with. So even after the second debate, which most people seem to think that Obama had done way better in, you still had a hardcore group of Republican tweeters who thought Romney had won it. Donald Trump was tweeting throughout the debate on how Obama's mismanaged the economy. So given this factor, is Twitter really a reliable way during elections, and how can we kind of address this? Thank you.
I actually think that's something that we're going to find out. It's going to come out more once this election is over. we'll find out, did Twitter really have an effect on the election, or was it just a bunch of people tweeting about this topic or that topic?
See, that's an important question that you raised. I'm glad you raised that, and very briefly to answer that. See, I think sometimes crowds always don't translate into votes. Similarly, the number of likes or comments that you get on Twitter may not really translate into votes. We'll have to see. This is a test of time, really. We'll have to see in mid-November as to whether all these tweets and these comments and this volume of this traffic on the social media really adds up in the end. In the end, does it really matter, or is it just a feel-good factor? Because if crowds were to translate into votes, then Surya will win elections hands down here.
Yeah. So I agree, but also don't forget that journalists who are very powerful in, like today, I open up the Hindu newspaper and say that Obama wins it against Mitt Romney in the second debate. Right? So that is a statement that journalist is making. I'm sure that journalist must have done his fact-checking. He obviously wouldn't be in the US to find it out. So the easiest way is for him to just quickly check on Facebook and Twitter and find out what are people thinking, and then he would make that basis based on that. And in my opinion, it's mostly correct. So I think it's a good way to get a feel, the pulse of the audience. I think so that way it will be very effective.
I think we could be here for another couple of hours having this conversation, so I'm sorry that we need to cut the questions short. I was hoping that panelists might like to make a closing comment. Would anybody like to start? Or?
I just like to appeal to all of you. In fact, when you come to your college, outside that income tax office, you have a board which says, have you registered? How many of you have got voter ID cards? Very few of you. All right, assuming you're above 18. I mean, if you're on second year onwards, I think you'll be eligible to vote. It happened after 26/11. A lot of people went out. There was anger. People held placards, enough is enough, candlelight vigils. In South Mumbai, 43%, after all this public outpouring of anger, 43% of people voted in South Mumbai. All right? It's one thing to like somebody's status message. It's one thing to tweet. It's another thing to go out there and make a difference. So my appeal to you, please go out and vote. Please join the political mainstream. We need good, educated people. And perhaps the next time, maybe 5 years from now, when we have this similar thing, I really congratulate the American Consulate for actually doing this, this program here, because it's led to a lot of introspection and soul searching. Next time, I hope that we are able to say that, well, we also had a prime ministerial debate, just like they have a presidential debate.
MOP Student Council, 2 years down the line, they had not only enrolled all the students of MOP who were 18 plus, probably Vidya was also there on the faculty at that time, but they went round the colleges of Chennai and saw to it that all the students who are 18 plus got themselves registered as voters. Obviously, they could not ensure they voted when the elections took place, but they saw to it that they had, and that time Mr. Naresh Gupta was the election commissioner and he had given a couple of interviews to that effect as well. So I'm proud to be an MOPN for that. Thank you.
So my quick point is that every one of us in this auditorium would like to vote. But what's really stopping us is just the drudgery of going out there, standing in lines and doing that. So, but all of us are on Facebook. So if we can find a way for all of us to vote through an online technology medium that is very tight and that's not possible to crack, you know, if we can have e-voting machines, why don't we take one step further and why don't we all just vote just by sitting in our bedroom? If that technology can come, I think it'll be a big game changer.
I'd just like to add that in India, you have one of the youngest populations, and I think if you got yourselves together, you'd be able to influence your elections to a bigger extent than you realize. So I agree with Sanjay and Karuba. Vote, exercise your right. Thank you.
I just want to thank all of you for hosting us and thank the panelists for what I thought was a wonderful conversation, which I wish we could continue for much longer. I think that the message here today is that we're all going to go and find out who our MLA is if we don't know who our MLAs are if we don't know who they are. We may change our privacy settings on our Facebook pages. And if you haven't registered to vote, you should register to vote if you can. And go out and vote. And thank you again so much for having us here.